All right, so we're welcoming you here into our living room here at Rourke. I am having a conversation with Crystal. Crystal is our director of operations here. And one of the things that I keep hearing, I get a lot of conversation about what are we doing and what's going on in our world. And a lot of the conversations end up going back to where our values are. And there's a pretty significant word inside of our mission, vision, values, our belief system, and all that. That the word is autonomy. And what's really been interesting is lately I've seen that word pop up all over the place. And so I felt the need to just have a conversation about autonomy. And part of it is going to be why we chose autonomy to be such a significant word inside of our business, but it's also to go through and discuss why is autonomy in general an important, like just the life skill to have. And so just going to open up that door. And then obviously if y'all have any questions, you're welcome to message us. You can comment on this video. You can message us, private message us, DM, find us wherever we are at. And we're happy to open up conversations further. But looking at autonomy, Crystal, one of the things that I was looking at when I chose that word is that autonomy is a very important piece of the puzzle for me. And you even talk about autonomy with a very particular word that's very important to me, and that's freedom. I have to feel freedom inside of what I'm doing. Otherwise, I get to the point where I'm caged in. And so if I can't have autonomy in the things that I'm doing, it's almost a boredom that comes in from the monotonous of doing a job or even performing a task over and over again. So that right there was one of the most important things when I was considering becoming a leader of a brokerage that I was forming. I want that to be probably one of the most important things to this organization, is to allow the autonomy, that moment to happen. So I know that when you said that earlier, we were talking about it, you talked about freedom and you went straight to that word. What is it about autonomy that was important to you? Because it was me manifesting what I wanted, but you joined in, and that was something that was really important to you as well. That's something that you grasped onto.
Yeah, I think that exactly what you said. It's just freedom is a huge part of what is needed to be able to grow. You can't really grow if you're being told what to do and told how to do it. So having the freedom and having the support and the flexibility to choose when you get that support and learn how to do things in your version of that, I think is extremely important.
I think one of the things that I pulled from is over the time that I've been able to be in the working world, I've had many different careers, and I say that just truly, I had many different careers, very, very random in the industries. I went from working in the church world to doing a nonprofit to I started a photography company, and then I went into the hair world at Paul Mitchell School Houston. Went from there into oil and gas, and from oil and gas into real estate, went from real estate into now running a brokerage. And so many different paths. And along every single one of those paths, I think one of the things that came flying back always was I want to be a leader that brings you into my fold based off of your strengths. If you are aligning with me in job description of kind of like what the functions are, what the outcome needs to be. Mm-hmm. I don't need to do anything other than align you with the foundation of who we are as a company, get you attuned and tied into what we're doing, and really just let you go. Because that's, I think, where you're going to have the most success inside of anything, is that if I brought you into my fold, I should trust you to do the work. Mm-hmm. And should I have defined the work properly, I don't think we're going to have any challenges. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the things that was really important to me. And you just said it, is that if I trust you and you come into my world and I've hired you into that, I should have done the vetting process to where I don't have to manage you in the activities. I can allow you to, again, just be autonomous in all that. So mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah, I think a word that you said is it's really important, I think, to have it is trust. I think you have to have trust if you're going to have the freedom and autonomy in your business, period. I think it has to be there.
Yeah, no, no, you're fine. Trust is it's massive to have trust. It's massive to be able to find that trust. So one of the things that I looked at is that, to me, the kind of another layer of it, right? So there's this feeling of autonomy that has to have again, just a freedom, right? Autonomy has to have that freedom, but it's more than that freedom. When I look at autonomy, I really start to kind of dig back psychologically into my world and kind of going back into, well, how was I raised? What was I doing? Why did that become a major facet of who I am? And I think autonomy in and of itself is a skill set. Autonomy is a skill set, but the reality about autonomy being a skill set is that it is rampant with other skill sets that are really important. So you can't have autonomy truly and use it as a skill set unless you have these other foundational skill sets. And I look at kind of reasoning and problem solving and perspective, because if I have autonomy, I should then have the ability to problem solve my way out of anything. I should have the ability to reason my way in and or out of anything. I should be able to have the ability to argue with you, to understand your perspective. I can still be unchanged. I don't have to change my opinion, but I can connect to who you are in that moment if I truly have autonomy. If I don't, autonomy turns real rigid real fast and becomes micromanaged. And it becomes, in my opinion, unfruitful. And if I come into the world where you and I may have this clash, if I don't really have a skill set of autonomy, I may very well turn that moment into well, you just don't understand. And I start judging. If I don't really have a true feeling and autonomy in what I'm doing, I will get judgy, because like at that point, then everything should start fitting into rules and regulations. And so if you and I disagree, well, then you're not fitting into one of these rules or regulations. And so you and I are broken. Right. And so I know it's a weird way to think of it, but for me, the autonomy side of it, not only is it the freedom of me to express or exercise myself or to use my skill sets, it's also this moment of like, I now also have to problem solve, and I also have to be graceful with people, and I have to be open-minded with people. Otherwise, it breaks.
Right.
So it's just, yeah. So that's just my kind of digging back into it. Now, I know that, again, kind of coming back to, I mean, you partnered with me. You chose me. You chose this crazy. You chose this massive craziness that I bring to the table. Where are your strengths growing because of that leadership foundation of autonomy?
Well, I'm going to kind of disagree with some of what you said.
I love it. Good. This is perfect. You should.
About some of what you said about, you kind of have to have these skill sets. I also think that you sometimes don't have those skill sets, and you build those skill sets of kind of independently thinking and being able to process through stuff and figure it out, because you are wired through school and education and how they tell you to do things. It's this one way, and there's not a lot of give in that. So, I mean, I think of like young agents that come on and young people that are just getting into business, and how they go in thinking, I need a lesson plan. I need, this is 1, 2, 3 steps of how to do things. And with how we do it, we give you the power to be able to do it and use the tools we've given you, but then it's on your own. And I noticed that there's steps that need to be taken more so with those people, because they're learning. They're learning how to build those skills. And even we talked about this yesterday. We were raised differently, similar but differently, and that was a big upbringing for me, is you do it how you're told to do it.
Right.
So even coming on with you, I mean, I think some of those skill sets had to be formed and kind of like, wait, you're just giving me the power to be able to do this. Okay, like, and I have that ability. I have it in there. So I guess you are right. I have it in there. It's just receiving that power to be able to have your individuality and like, okay, I have this. Like I've got this, but wasn't used to that. Like,
so, I like that idea, because like part of what we're doing here is it really is attractive to a lot of people. And you and I have sat down and try to really figure out, okay, what is it that is attractive about what we're doing? Because I don't think we're doing anything that's rocket science. I'm a firm believer in setting up some of these foundational systems, digging into those inside of your own strengths, customizing your business, and then just allowing yourself to roll that autonomy kind of conversation. So I don't think there's anything magical, but maybe there is magic in that word that I haven't allowed myself to discover in what you just said, because I looked at it as I was almost forced in all of my upbringing to be that. And so in my mind, the skill sets go hand in hand. But if you're not that, and you've been unlocked to, or you've been opened up to that, if autonomy has been a gift then now given to you,
It
now
gives
those skill sets flood in.
right. So I think we're both right. I think the skill sets are probably there
Yeah.
because I think there are people that have to have rigid rules, period. But I think sometimes you don't realize that you have that because you're so used to following rules. It's built in our society, it's built in our education system.
Yeah.
It's how it's just how we know to live. So until you actually work for somebody that allows you to have that freedom to figure out things, and you need to get to A. How you do that doesn't matter. Then you don't really realize your capabilities. So
Yeah.
I think everybody has to be given that at some point.
I wonder if it's so those who have lived inside of this as part of the skill sets, the autonomy word, right, as a part of their skill sets, for them, the attractive nature of it is that it's true. I think maybe that is true in what we do. I've surprised the crap out of people when they walk in and we start having the conversation about branding, and almost every independent broker wants to brand based off of me. I'm the brand. You're welcome. Now let me elevate you. And that's not, I put that in very rigid terms. Obviously, there's some really amazing independent brokerages who have some amazing leadership skills. So don't see me mocking skills. But I don't think people understand how much freedom there is inside of our organization with that word. Like, I mean it when I look at that space, and I truly give it away. And then those who have never seen it before, it's almost as if when you experience freedom for that first time, or when you have that ability to express yourself openly, it's probably attractive in the sense that, like, I never knew that I could do it this way. And when we open up the door to say, well, this way is actually just you. We're here as to be your guide. It's almost like, so in Donald Miller's book, Story, what is it? The story, I'm missing up the title. Gosh, anyways, Donald's
Building your story, or
the
story brand.
Story brand. There we go. In Donald Miller's book, Story Brand, he talks about the character arc, and he talks about when you start looking at building what's happening inside of your world. If you're an organization, the reality is that the people who you're serving, they're the heroes of the story. You're just the sage, and I think we just really take that very seriously here, in the sense that, like, we don't need to be heroic in this. Giving autonomy is actually giving people their opportunity to become heroes. And we're watching people become heroes inside of our organization. What's really neat about that is it's not even just about selling real estate. Like, so many people have been unlocked into doing things that they never really would have done before. I'm watching people serve in communities in ways that I've been part of these people's lives in the past before they joined us, and watching what they're doing is just pretty phenomenal. We've got a really young fella who he's every day acting as if his mind's just been blown. And I think when you have that autonomy as a structure, that's what's possible. I like your little, I like your the way you weaved it, because I said, here's autonomy, here's the skill sets, they stack, and you're like, well, no, here's autonomy, here's the skill sets come on top as you've given people the freedom for autonomy. I like that. I really like that idea.
Yeah, just a different viewpoint on it.
So one of the things that I know I've dealt with in the past, coaching people just in general, businesses all the way around, is that when you start to really talk about this word and you open it up and you believe in it, to put it in place as a whether it's in your mission statement, or it's in your value statement, it's in your belief statement, wherever it fits, if it is a thread in your company, the challenge is, if I do this, I lose control as a leader. If I give you the autonomy to do it however you want, I lose control as a leader. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. We can talk about autonomy and believe in it, but it's almost always going to find leadership still has a hook somewhere inside of it so that they can remain in control. And I think that's why it's hard. I just think that's why it's hard for people to really give this piece away.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's hard. I also think that everybody kind of, not everyone, maybe there are people that have less of it, but I think to a point, everybody has a little bit of control issues. And sometimes when you have created something and you've babied it, it is hard. It is hard to give that away. But at the end of the day, you do have to stay true to what you believe, and nobody can grow. And ultimately, what our mission, vision, values stand by are seeing people grow to their full capabilities with us giving them the tools. And to do that, you have to kind of give them the space to do that and let go of things.
Yeah. The way that because it's true, if you give it away, you do have some challenges. Now we're in a unique industry in that people who are with us, they're 1099, and so they're starting their own thing, and so to give them autonomy actually should be the standard. To me, it should be just the standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, it's not, and that it is what it is. Some people crave or need that structure. They need those limits. They need those boundaries put on their lives so that then they can function properly, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What we're attracting, though, and what we want are to see those people with that kind of that autonomous structure anyways, and we're just helping them build those foundations and building them, serving them, becoming that like sage again. But like when you feel like it loosens control, the reality is that if I allowed you to operate inside of your excellence, you're going to be more excellence when you feel the freedom to operate inside of it. I could be hindering something that you're really good at if I tell you, you need to do this, and this is how you have to do it, versus saying, this is what we need to do. This is the desired outcome. I believe you have the skill sets to get there. Here are a couple of tools that must be used for the sake of compliance, for the sake of X, Y, and Z. However, the rest of it, I'm leaving in your hands. I trust that you can get there. Like there's going to be this excellence that comes out of that we've never been able to realize in our own self. And I think that's just kind of the human nature, or at least I found in my life. I've tended to attract the people who have strengths inside of where my gaps are. And if I try to help you be somebody out of my gap when it's your strength, I'm hindering your ability to grow because I just don't have that skill set. And I think it's just especially you. So I know that one of the things that we're going to do soon is talk about strengths. And when I look at strengths inside of who you are inside of our organization, and just using the Strengths Finder book, Gallup Poll does a Strengths Finder book. And so it goes through and it talks about these certain strengths. And usually, almost everybody I come into contact with, usually there's going to be some sort of overlap. People who are together, there's some sort of like similarities. You and I have zero things that overlap from the Strengths Finder, which I love. And so here's the reality, though. Here's the beautiful thing about that. If we're going to build the longevity of this organization and see it grow to the extent that it can, I can't tell you how to be really good at your strengths. You can't tell me how to be really good at my strengths, but I can certainly like slough off the things that are inside of my gaps and say like, those are where you live. And I can take the humble seat, that sounds weird saying the humble seat. I can take a state of humility and learn from you and let you rise and be the leader in certain areas. And I think that's really probably what makes us work really well together anyways. And then in all honesty, our strengths push on the other person to be better at what they're really good at. You do that for me a lot. You go in, you say like, no, like that's what you need to do. And if I didn't have the autonomy and it was always Crystal, we need to do this, and this is how I think we should do it. Well, if you always perform that task, we don't know what our potential is.
Yeah.
And I think we have some pretty massive potential. And likewise, if I'm a leader, the people inside of my organization, if I have defined what the outcome is, if I can get you to align with the outcome, I should have hired you with your strengths and trusted your strengths to get you where you said we can go. And I just need to let you run, because then I've allowed you to become the most excellent version of you. I may have hindered your ability to become excellent by putting stipulations on the way I wanted it done. Yeah. Now it's scary. And I think where I really found, because I'm a control freak, I am a control freak. Anybody who knows me, I think I have the best way of doing everything, which is really interesting. Then that this is one of my big value statements. This is one of my big mission statements. This is one of my big beliefs, is to be able to have an autonomous organization. However, I got to a point in one of my careers, and I was in a leadership, and it wasn't, I had people working for me, but then I had this cast of characters that were volunteers who were agreeing to help me through certain things that I was doing inside of my projects. For me to tell a volunteer what to do, to me, it would have broken my ability to have volunteers. I would have lost every volunteer if I said, you need to do it this way, got frustrated when you didn't do it, showed you how to do it, micromanage you're doing it. You're like, dude, I don't have to be here, right? And that was just I was forced to look at things and say, if I gave away a piece of this, because obviously I needed it, I wouldn't have had volunteers if I could have paid people. I wouldn't have had volunteers if I could have leveraged myself to do it. So if I'm leveraging this out and I'm asking you to do it as a volunteer, and you've taken that chunk from me to be able to do, I probably gave it to you because you have some sort of underlying strength to get it done. So I've got to trust that. You may not have all the skill sets, but you have some sort of strength to get it done. I have to be okay with it hitting at like a 75%. If I did it and it would be 100%, and you do it and it's 75%, I have to be okay with that. And I started getting into that space. That's where I really began to like change my mind about how I controlled things. Is that if you gave me the gift of time to do what I do most excellently, and you took something from that so that I could be better at all this, well, then you've just given me a gift. And like 75%, like I gained so much more. My investment was so much more than that 75%. And so I'm happy with that. I'm excited about that. And so I was forced to start thinking this way because I was working with volunteers. You change the way you think when you can't tell somebody to do something because you're paying them to do it. You have to change the way you inspire people to move.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too.
Yeah. You have to, yeah, you have to change the way you inspire people to move. Okay, so one of the things that I was thinking about, kind of coming back to this, is inside of, and this is kind of coming back to, we talked about who we are and what's going on inside of our business and all that stuff. But the reality is that to have autonomy and to be an autonomous leader, really what you are inside of leadership, if you really want autonomy, is like you're just a foundation. You're always just building foundations.
Mhm.
And that's it. Like you're not, and I say that's it. Obviously there's a lot more to that.
Yeah.
But like that's it for that particular word, that skill set, that autonomy. If I'm gonna allow you to run, I'm just gonna be the person that is helping to build the foundations, right? Or at least the way that I look at it.
Yeah, maybe there's rooms to help them grow in the areas that they want. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're the foundation for them. Yeah.
Anybody who really wants to have this as something that they're putting into their world, autonomy as a way to help themselves grow, and they're a leader, and so they're trying to lead by giving people the freedom for autonomy. What would you say is something that's like one or two things that's really important that they do as a leader?
Uh, um, I think one, letting go of control and trusting their strengths and knowing their strengths. I think you have to know, you have to put the work into your employees. You have to know who they are and care, to really be able to give them what they are going to be able to build on. You can't just give them just guess or just hire somebody and assume. I have a friend she recently has a leadership position that she has received, and it's a struggle because she doesn't have that support behind her, and she doesn't have the foundation, and she doesn't have the leadership to guide her and learn her strengths to know where she's going to be the best fit at. And I think that more companies need to be doing that, because you're not, the old school way of thinking of do 1, 2, 3, 4 it's not there anymore. It's you're never going to build leaders and future leaders if you can't give them the freedom to grow.
Oh, gosh, so many good things just happen in like that one grouping of sentences. Trust, know your people, and you don't grow leaders without it. Like that's huge. Like so let's work our way backwards. I just want to remember that I want to talk about getting to know your people and the trust. But when you say like if they're not able to build foundation and you develop your strengths through that and allow the autonomy for you to grow,
Mhm.
well, then I'm not building leaders. It's
Mhm.
pretty bold.
Mhm.
You know, and I also think about like it's if I always gave you a 1, 2, 3 order, like I just don't think that's efficient. I think a lot of people would consider that efficient to just give somebody a job description and say run with it. Like that's a computer.
Right. I think there's a starting point for everything. I mean, I think there's a guide. I guess a guide would be not instructions, but a guide. Like, this is the point that you want to get to. This is where you need to get. But, if you find another way, another path to do it. I mean, even from whenever I first started working with you, it was one of the things you were like, hey, you're starting fresh. You're starting with fresh eyes. Like, it was one of the things you kept on telling me. Like, if you see that something can be done differently or you see a better path to it, let me know. It was never, I think, openness, like just hear even what we're doing. And for any company that's starting out, I think it's super important to be open to have everybody come to you and show you, hey, like this way isn't the best way. I see something different because they have those strengths for a reason and they're telling you that for a reason. And you have to be open to that. You have to be open to other options. That's how you get to autonomy.
I am going to cut that whole little section out and just cut it down because like I think like that's it. That's it. That was brilliant. I love it. Everything like that's awesome. Sorry, my brain's just kicking in now. I think that's like I really do. I think what you just said is leadership at its core. And what's neat about it is it's everything that we've talked about. The interesting thing about autonomy is that we've still talked about being together.
Mhm.
So
You still have support, but you have the option to be flexible with that
yeah,
support.
it's I keep coming back to something that's become a reoccurring theme for me in the books that we've been reading recently, and just in my own thought processes and everything is that like everything that we're doing right now, this is much more the story about the forest than it ever is about the tree. I think we become a society that celebrates the tree. We don't
Mhm.
look at the forest, but everything that you and I are about inside of everything that we lead and how we lead. And I think what a lot of people are attracted to us and some of the most fantastic leaders that are out there that we are inspired by, they're always talking about the forest.
Mhm.
Even though they give the people the ability to customize, grow, and to feel themselves inside of their own strengths and to have that autonomy, it's still about the tree. It's still about being together. It's still about the community.
Mhm.
So it's a really interesting juxtaposition of autonomy is still together.
It is. It absolutely is. And if you even look further into like our um the business and how it started out, you you have this running joke that I could take over the brokerage and that I could run it. I always disagree with that. And the reason I disagree is I think that I couldn't have grown to where I am. And I think the change over the last year has been exceptional because I had you to support, but also give me the freedom to make mistakes, to grow, to learn, to build on my strengths. So and vice versa. I think, and then also our agents, like we wouldn't be Borco without each other and without our agents. It
Gosh,
just it wouldn't be that way. Yeah, there could be another version of me or another version of you, but our strengths and building this together and then having the freedom to be able to build and make mistakes is what has gotten us here. And I mean, how many times have our agents come to us with suggestions and who they are, our culture that we've created that's really, really created the freedom that is here. And I think it we're not the first ones that did it.
no, we
we
absolutely yeah,
read a lot. It's a huge part of
yeah.
our growth, which I'm so appreciative of that is a big push for us. But we've gotten inspiration from a lot of different companies, and I think it is an inspiration that needs to continue for future companies to continue to grow
Yeah.
in the right path.
We just get to fall in line, and there's this term that's like we're where we're at because we're able to stand on the shoulders of giants.
Mhm.
And so we still have that like where we're able to see it's almost like those the in Spain they have that competition so you can build the highest human pyramid.
Mhm.
Like we are the kid with the helmet right now. We're the kid with the helmet that's 2 years old and climbing to the top, and he gets to be at the top of the food chain because of those who have gone before us to help us. Like I am not who I am because I've figured it out and I'm masterful at like this. It's because of the people who walked with me,
Yeah.
and I think you would say likewise. one of the things that you said though is about our agency. So if I am in leadership and I am looking at this, and autonomy is a big piece of the puzzle, getting to know the people is incredibly important. You said that a second ago.
Mhm.
Like if you don't know your people, autonomy can't be a value. I'm just going to say it again. If you truly don't know
Mhm.
your people, autonomy can't be a value inside of your company.
Mhm.
And a myriad of reasons, but let's just go back to one of the most simple is that if I don't know who you are, what you do and your strengths and all of that stuff, and I give you something to do, I don't know that you're going to be able to do it, nor do I know that I'm leading you in the right way, nor do I know if I'm able to even inspire you to what's next. If I don't know what inspires you, if I don't know what makes you tick, if I don't know where your strengths are, if I don't know all of the skill sets that you possess, if I don't know those things and I just hired you based off of you came in, you filled a job description because you have the equivalent of what I think that person should look like. But after that, I just give you a book and say, run, or I say, hey, this is our outcome, do it. Like you may have wildly different ways of doing things, thought processes of doing things. It just may be wildly different. And actually, I think back to a story when I was in a previous job. I had a fellow that worked for me, and he was really good at the skill set that he was really good at the skill set that I needed for him to fulfill. He jumped in, and I told him the outcome, and I was like, just get it done. Well, unfortunately, the person who was my boss saw this individual and what he was doing, and was always like, he's never around early, like in work hours. And I have a challenge with that because I had somebody tell me that he's actually just he sleeps until like noon and then gets up and goes. And I'm like, yeah. And I don't care that he does that because I asked him to get this thing done. He does his best work. He's a night owl. Like, and so I would stifle his ability to create excellence if I didn't know that he was a night owl and I wasn't okay with that. And I allowed him to be able to fit into his strengths. Like he really was terrible. Like I could tell him to do anything in the morning time and like his brain just did not click. He was that slow starter. And there are people who are morning slow starters. I know a lot of them. And so I gave that piece up and allowed him just to run, and he produced some of the best content that I ever needed. That like what I wanted and what he gave me was light years beyond like our outcome. And so it's that same thing. I knew him and I knew what he was doing. I understood what his goals are, and I listened to where he wanted to grow and all that stuff. And so what I had him doing, just because it needs to make sense, is producing and creating video content as like B footage and buffer video stuff. Well, I just wanted run of the mill stuff that I kind of gave him some inspiration towards. And what he did was beautiful, but I knew that he had the ability to create beautiful things. That he could take what was in my imagination and make it good. And I knew that he desired to go, he didn't always want to be with me. He wanted to go to the next level.
Mhm.
Well, I knew that from the very beginning. Otherwise, I might try to put ceiling on him so he stays with me. I was always trying to figure out a way that I could release him into what he wanted to do next. I thought that that was always going to be the best way to get the best content out of him. And for the time frame that I had him, I would have the most excellent stuff. And so if you don't know your people, you don't know how to do that. And you don't know what's going on. And you can't, which is my next little segue, is trust. I don't have a good measure for trust. Not that I don't trust people, but that I trust everybody. So I'm truly way too optimistic. So I trust everybody, and everybody's got 12 chances with me. You have a different trust filter.
Mhm.
So then you can answer this question better. How do you, as a leader, develop trust in the process of gaining autonomy as a strength in my business?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, I won't say that I go in not trusting people because it's not that. I just don't fully trust them either until I get to know them. So I guess the easiest answer to that question is getting to know who you're working with and getting to know them. Like, I mean, it's just like dating, you don't know if you trust that person or if your values align until you really get to know them. So I guess I kind of take that in every relationship, no matter what that is. It's just I have to really get to know a person. I'm not fully vulnerable until I do. And I think that's,
it's a reciprocating thing it almost sounds eternal a bit. Like, as I get to know you, I develop more trust, and as I trust you, I get to know more of you, and it's a cycle. So how do you get to that point where, well, I think I know, like, you've got to be together. If you're not together, there's not the opportunity. Like, there's so you said, if it's like dating. So if we're a company and we want to get to know each other, we've got to be able to be together. So that might be some of the challenges that I think I've watched a few leaders struggle with, is that, like, COVID has created separation.
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, even when COVID was going on, there was still the potential to get to know people from just conversation. You know, there's the mom and daughter team that I got to know mostly over the phone, you know, at the beginning. And I think there's still potential there to get to know people. I think you just have to put the effort in.
What are some of the, so when you're looking at trust, what are some of the doors that open that you know that you can take a chance on trusting somebody or opening up trust, or like is there anything that you could say is mile markers that we could look at and say, okay, we're developing trust here? I know that that's a real generic question. Yeah.
Like, so you're asking for,
like, how do I recognize trust?
are you asking for you?
How
do I recognize trust?
No, for a leader who's looking at this, and we just said you have to get to know your people, and getting to know your people develops trust. Well, how do we know that we're developing trust?
I don't know if there's like a marker to describe that. I think that's like a feeling, I guess. In my like, and that's only coming from me. I think everybody, you have a totally different level of trust, and I think you trust everybody until they prove otherwise, which is excellent. And, you know, I think that's just a character trait that's everybody holds differently. For me, it's I think just in my gut, and then you have.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, a woman's intuition and the gut conversation, it's real. It is a real thing. Ellen's that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for me, one of the things that I'm kind of coming back to in my mind as I start to reel this in is that there is, I think, something that's mile markers, but it's not along the route of trust. It's before trust begins. Because if I'm bringing you into my fold and I'm bringing you into my organization, I've already built the vehicle for that. That's my values.
That's true.
So you don't get in the car unless you pass through that values filter. So I think the mile markers are, at what point do you show me, what point do I see you living up inside of my values? So if freedom is one of my big values, and I always feel that you are, like you're micromanaged or oppressed or anything like that, or looked down upon, I've got to discover what's happening there. Because, like, if you're in my organization, like, there's something that's happening that like you're not experiencing that. So I got to break down that wall. So it's almost like if trust is an active exploration of values.
Yeah. And I also want to say, like, I think it's a double way road there. Like, you have to show that you're trustworthy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a huge part. I think, you know, our agents trust us. I hope they do. I think they do. And I think I'm glad that they do. But I think we've had to show them that, you know, they're deserving of, or we're deserving of their trust, and we're giving them.
And I think one of the things it comes down to on the trust factor is that if I look at it, and what I said was true, is that it's a measurement of the values, and I'm always exploring how are we connecting on each of these values. Those are the markers. Well, then I have to celebrate, and I have to speak from, and I have to have a very clear, concise story of where my values are, because I've watched a lot of the companies that I work for start to break down inside of that values conversation when, and I think back to when I was with, I'm trying to avoid naming the companies because I just don't want it to be that way. But one of the companies that I worked for, along the way, I climbed pretty quickly inside of this organization, starting out as just the guy who gave tours in the building. Well, then I got to be the guy who was advising people. Well, then I got to be the guy who was leading sales. And so it was just kind of like I was had this climbing moment in this organization. I was like, this is awesome. And there was a particular person who was one of the major leaders inside of the organization at the top of the food chain. And I got a chance to get to know him fairly well enough that like I could have correspondence with him. I wouldn't call him all the time, or I wouldn't email him all the time, or I wouldn't text him all the time, but I had the ability to do a one-off, right? So it was just that. It wasn't quite huge. Well, there's one day, and he gave this great conversation. I mean, it was just like an amazing little leadership quip that just happened out of the blue. In the process of it, and he was like, if people don't know where you want to go, they don't know how to help you get there. I love that. I was like, man, that's brilliant. And so it's like everybody should always know where you want to go. And for me, I'm like, if I really wanted to look at what I want out of this company, if I'm going to continue to grow in this company, when this guy decides he wants to retire, I want to be him. That's the job that I want. So I wrote in this email just to kind of say, hey, loved it, thought it was inspirational, it was really awesome. And I want you to know the day you decide to step down, I hope that I'm a guy that could end up on the short list of people that you would consider that could take over your role. Just kind of really cool, inspiring. He got completely offended by that. Send it to the owner of the company, that the segment, the franchise that I was working for. And I was like, you should probably have a conversation with this guy. This is a little bit out of line. I was like, where the hell is this coming from? I was genuinely upset because here's a guy who just spoke values and I tagged into and understood and wanted to live inside of that value add. And then he destroyed it by what he said. I was like, at that point, he broke my ability to stay in that company long term because he broke the value conversation that he's talked about. So you can't talk out of two sides of your mouth, exactly what you said. So it's a two-lane road. Mm-hmm. I've brought you into my world. You live inside of my values. I have to also live inside of my values. And the way that I do that as a leader is I celebrate our values and I speak to our values and I reward to our values. And I think if you do that, a lot of people struggle with, well, what do I do when somebody's broken my values? It's like, I don't know that you always have to punish from your values, which is, I think, what most people do. You reward to your values, but like I can have a quick conversation with you and say, hey, when you came onto our world, I know that where we're butting heads right now is because like I believe in this as a value statement inside of our company. Maybe we didn't have the right conversation about what that word means to you. And I just want to know, what does freedom mean to you? What does love mean to you? Whatever your value was, what does that mean to you? Because I broke down as a leader by not understanding what that meant to you. If that's where we're having most of our challenges, there's not punishment to it. It's just the conversation back to it. It's the rewarding of it. It's the conversation around it. It's the celebration of it. And I think that's a beautiful thing that leads to continuous trust. That, like you said, I get to know you, I trust you, I trust you, I get to know you, I get to know you, I trust you. And it's a great cycle. But then, like, if we work that joker backwards, you've got autonomy, and then you get to start stacking those skills that you said are really fun to explore once you have been gifted the freedom of autonomy. Mm-hmm. I love it. I think that's a great place to kind of put the period on our conversation today.
So too.
You're just saying that because you love sitting in these scenarios to talk.
Oh, this is good.
No, and I appreciate it because I do think you have a brilliant perspective that I don't often get to tap into, because like the way we do run autonomously is that you and I don't always connect mm-hmm. like line for line. And so these are good to be able to sit down, to have these little interview moments and to express how we feel about what's happening. And I don't think that any of it, even in our disagreements, is more congruent towards what the value is mm-hmm. than a disagreement that's like agree to disagree. I don't think that is ever going to happen because we do have that trust in each other. Yeah. So very cool. All right. So that's us. That's who we are. That's a little bit of our living room conversation to you. And I appreciate you joining us. So have a great day, and thanks for sitting along.